Welcome back to PCW, where today we are reviewing WWE Smackdown. Smackdown this week was not the most particularly thrilling watch, and if anything it felt like the WWE were just trying to desperately get past it. This was an A to B show, where the WWE struggled because of a real lack of depth on their roster, a major injury to Bayley, and some definite dark clouds over Jimmy Uso in the main event scene. For all this and more, I'm Tom Collihew here for PCW. Be sure to hit like and subscribe if you haven't, and let's get started. As usual, this week's SmackDown was built around the Roman Reigns storyline, with Jimmy Uso appearing multiple times over the night, largely with Jey Uso, who returned during the opening segment. The opening segment featured Roman Reigns coming down to the ring, being joined by both Usos, eventually pulling them into a big hug and saying, "We are united." There was no mention whatsoever of Jimmy Uso's DUI. It's very unlikely it's going to happen on TV, and honestly, if he needs to work, he needs to work, but it felt like Jey Uso really had a pointed message for him during one particular moment of this. We're not going to find out much about what happens with Jimmy Uso from here, and to be honest, it's not really our place to, but hopefully he gets the help he needs. This promo for Roman was ostensibly supposed to be about Edge, but Edge was barely mentioned, and in fact Edge was barely featured. Edge somehow just doesn't feel like a big deal this time round. Between that opening promo and commercial breaks, it took us more than a half hour to get to our opening match between Nakamura and Baron Corbin. More than a half hour. Not many people wrestled this week. Big E was on commentary and really padded the show out by being pally with Pat McAfee. That's a tongue twister and a half. The actual match itself was pretty good. Baron Corbin continues on his devolution, and it's interesting that essentially his car has been stolen by Nakamura and Boogs. The plan is clearly to make me feel sorry for Baron Corbin, and WWE, god damn it, you've made me feel sorry for Baron Corbin. Nakamura won the match with a Kinshasa, and he now qualifies for a Money in the Bank ladder match that he has practically no chance of winning. But regardless of that, I'm still excited for it. The main thing for me here is hoping that this is the end of constant rematches with Shinsuke Nakamura and Baron Corbin, but at the same time we're seeing actual genuine character development for both men, so I wouldn't want it to end completely. I'm really torn on this. This time last week the SmackDown Women's division featured only 7 people, one of whom was not available in Sasha Banks, who was off taking a break. Then you also had the tag team champions who barely featured on SmackDown. The WWE clearly has taken strides to fix this. They've added Zelina Vega last week, and this week they added 3 more people. Firstly, they added Toni Storm, who would actually have a debut, well, a vignette I should say, after this. But in addition to that, Shotzi Blackheart and Tegan Nox, now just known as Shotzi and Nox, or Noxie, or Shox, there's opportunities there, debuted against Natalya and Tamina and picked up the win in a match that featured quite a lot of interesting tag team offense, some of which worked, some of which didn't, but it was a very smooth match apart from that brief moment when Tegan Nox missed her cue and decided to stop attacking Tamina, attack Natalya, then go back to attacking Tamina. The chemistry is not there yet. Time will sort that out. After all, this is a very, very quick debut, basically because of someone missing. It's particularly interesting that Tegan Nox appeared after just returning to NXT on Tuesday. It's been said a few times now, and I'll reiterate, the WWE are planning to call people up with no care whatsoever about what the actual planned storylines are down in NXT. This may be the end of the Tegan Nox The Way storyline, and certainly Candice LeRae will have to find someone new to face. Maybe Ember Moon, who is still planned to be called up, but is being considered a bigger name and saved for the draft. That may have changed as well. Our second hour draw segment featured Sonya Deville and Bianca Belair. Sonya Deville would come down to the ring and announce who would be Bayley's replacement. However, Bianca Belair will not be defending the championship at Money in the Bank. She will instead be defending it next week against Carmella. Expect Sasha Banks to be involved in that. As an aside, this also means that Carmella has been pulled from the Money in the Bank ladder match and replaced by Liv Morgan. Whatever the storyline was going to be for Liv Morgan, and I think it would have been quite an interesting one, that's been pushed out of the way as well. Bayley will be out of action for 9 months. That means she will miss WrestleMania due to an anterior cruciate ligament tear. Freak accident. Nothing that they could have done about it, and she's going to be massively missed going forwards. Our final match and final men's Money in the Bank qualifying match was another rematch between Cesaro and Seth Rollins. Now we've seen this one to death, and mostly this wasn't very interesting, but for the last 5 minutes or so they managed to find a way to make it interesting, with the turnbuckle cover being pulled off, Cesaro being thrust into it as it were, and he ends up covered in blood, just dripping everywhere. It was a good finish, certainly didn't bury Cesaro. Seth got a little bit lucky with certain aspects, and it was quite a long match, but at the same time, I'm glad this one's over. Seth goes on to Money in the Bank where he genuinely has an opportunity of winning. Cesaro, however, he needs to move in a draft because his push is long over. Backstage, Seth Rollins made a point of covering Caleb Braxton in all of his goddamn sweat, and then afterwards started speaking about Edge and how Seth might well cash in a Money in the Bank briefcase during the match between Edge and Roman Reigns, which is something I spoke about last week. Edge was there to head him off, but not really. Edge basically was just really annoying. Edge just isn't a big deal at the minute. Finally, and there will definitely be some awkwardness over timing here, we had Roman Reigns coming down to the ring to answer the challenge of Edge. He essentially said to both Usos, don't come down. They came down anyway. He said to them, don't get into the ring. They respected that. So Roman started a bit of a brawl with Edge. I don't get the story here where essentially the story is, let's have a fight. Let's have a fight. Let's have a match. Let's have a fight. Did you use all your ideas before WrestleMania? Give me something new. Thankfully there was something new, because when it looked like the Usos were going to get involved, the Mysterios returned, Rey and Dominic with chairs to smash them up a little bit in what suggests that there's going to be a 6-man tag match next week with fans back for SmackDown. This got awkward because they essentially finished the whole thing. The Usos were beat down, Edge put his new submission crossface into play, and then they just sort of kept going and doing it again and again, because clearly they hadn't got enough to actually fill their show. This is a problem. SmackDown this week was not the most exciting. The obvious contenders won, but we did have a call-up, so the women's division got a little bit of excitement added to it. Carmella versus Bianca Belair is good for Bianca, not so for Carmella, and could be very good for Sasha Banks on her return. It was clear though that the Edge-Roman storyline isn't quite working, and they didn't have enough to fill a SmackDown. There's a number of people that weren't used that could have been. There was no sign of Zelina Vega, there was no Dolph Ziggler or Robert Roode. There was nothing in that regard. They've added people in the intent of basically padding the roster, but they could still have used Sami Zayn. They could have used Big E or Kevin Owens. We could have got Big E versus Sami Zayn. That's at least somewhat different, even though it is moderately recent that we've had it. It's clear that SmackDown is really desperately in need of a draft. Good thing it's coming soon, it just can't come soon enough. For PCW, I've been Tom Colhue. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you next time.